Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Calhoun's. Summer means days on the lake, family reunions, being outdoors. It's 1,000 degrees. It's the perfect time to get outdoors. But Calhoun's, if you are getting out with the family and all that stuff, they have the solution in terms of food. Right there it is. The Feed 5 and Feed 10 family pack. It is your summer special, folks. You can get barbecue, you can get it with ribs, and it comes with all the fixings: bread, beans, slaw, sauce, napkins, utensils, plates. Literally, they do all the work, and you don't have to. You just go by, place the order, go by, pick up the box, go home with it, go outside with it. And then when you're done, put all the trash back in there and throw it away. Calhoun's is a ready-made picnic in a box, literally a picnic basket from Calhoun's. Get out and check them out this week. All right. I teased on Twitter yesterday and on Sports Talk Friday that we'd be talking about coaches in their 5th season. Well, I've got all the math and got all the numbers. I didn't want to waste it today because it would be rushed, so I'm saving that. So anybody who's tuning in to see that, and I'm sure there are people throwing things to television right now. You said, but anyway,
my mom couldn't wait.
That will be in a week or two. I'll bring that back out when we've got more time to discuss it. I didn't want to run through it too fast today. Instead, I want to talk about what I put on Twitter this week in terms of a question about a rebuilding, reloading type year. And first of all, before we get into that, I don't see how you can say it's not a reloading year because of the starters you lost. Now, I've been hit on Twitter saying it's not a reload. Look at all the talent. Okay, but a talented freshman is not as good as a talented senior in most cases. Would you rather have Peyton Manning as a freshman or Peyton Manning the senior? Guys with experience typically beat the inexperienced. Not always. Some guys are immediately great. But for me, when I look at that, and again, you go back, most people look at it and say 3rd in the East this year. Is there anybody here that says it's not a reloading year, rebuilding type year, whatever you want to call it, step back year?
Go ahead.
I think it is.
Okay.
Because I think you're losing too many impact players. And we
Right.
touched on the 4, the primary ones. So I think it is. I think it's going to be hard to match what you did a year ago.
Does everybody agree with that? Or is there anybody here that
it
would
is.
say this is not a rebuild or a reload?
The graphic you showed in the previous segment with all of the players that have to be replaced and all the question marks that are in those spots to be determined, yeah, I think it's reloading, rebuilding, whatever.
Okay, so that's what we think. But I put up a question on Twitter, and we can show it right now. I asked folks, rebuilding years. Well, 38% of you said, and that's 500 votes. It's a pretty good little vote. 38% said they should not occur in year 5. All right. 30% say they're allowed occasionally. And then 32% said, well, they're normal except at Alabama. You have rebuilding years on occasion. But the biggest group there, and it's not by a huge majority, obviously, but 38%, your biggest group, says it's not allowed in year 5. So my question, who's right? Is it completely out of the ordinary to have a year 5 rebuild?
No, I wouldn't think so, simply because, okay, what kind of recruiting classes have you had before that? How many guys have you had? If you don't have guys leave early for the pros this past year, you've got Barnett back, you've got Kamara back, you've got Malone back. So 3 of the holes that you talked about are because guys went to the NFL. You can't blame that on a coach. If anything, give a guy credit for, hey, you found guys good enough to go to the pros early. So I don't think it's unusual.
See, Bob hit on what I think is the argument. You could have Barnett back, and you could have Malone back, and you can have Kamara back. All of them underclassmen. I remember one year, a few years back, so Florida wins a national championship, and they only had like 2 or 3 players drafted, and like, wow. Well, that's because all the juniors came back, including Tebow. And then the next year they had 12 taken. So I think with the NFL draft, with more people going pro early, I think you are allowed an occasional situation where you're reloading or rebuilding. It could be year 5, it could be year 7. I think sometimes it could just catch up with you in a particular year.
Yeah, and if you're talking about if your rebuild, reload is now to the fact where it's 7-5 at worst and not 5-7, or 3-9 like happened to D'Antonio at Michigan State, 4-8 like happened to Mora, you see that, and I think that's survivable at most places. There's a belief in some that, well, year 5 should be better than year 4, and year 6 should be better. Well, nobody stair steps like that. You go back, Nick Saban's 3rd year, 14-0. The next year, they lost 3 games, or 10-3. So the argument that, well, how could you get worse in year 4 than you were in year 3? That's someone that really isn't paying much attention to how these rosters ebb and flow each year. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary. Nobody wants them. You just have to limit how far back you step if you want to keep your job.
Well, and in Tennessee's case, again, you got to look at what Butch inherited. I mean, he wasn't in a position to redshirt anybody. There's not a lot of red shirts on Tennessee's football team. Just imagine if Josh Dobbs had been redshirted. What would Tennessee's year be looking like right now? You look in the Big Ten, there's more redshirting going on. In the SEC, you get more of these impact guys, 5-star, 4-star guys that want to play right away. And where Tennessee was before, they had to play guys right away. They weren't in a position to redshirt and build for the future. Nobody was on board with waiting 5, 6, 7 years. But when you're coming from a historic low and you're playing Alabama every year from the West and you're in the East, that's tough.
They tried to redshirt Dobbs 2 years in a row.
You
And they weren't able to.
yeah.
Well,
The other part is you don't want to have this 2 years in a row.
Right.
That's
yeah.
your
Yeah.
issue. You can have that 1 year, but 2 years in a row to rebuild, reload, that would not be acceptable.
And it doesn't mean you don't have the potential for success. Tennessee could win the East.
Yeah.
Tennessee's not the favorite and shouldn't be going in, but Tennessee has enough talent that has been recruited over the last several years, like Darrell Taylor, like Jonathan Kongbo, like the 2 quarterbacks that will battle it out, that if everybody pans out or close to it and you get a couple of breaks, you could still win the East in a reloading year.
Yeah, now one of the things I will say, that there have red shirts, as you talked about, Mike, there's another side to that as well. You've had a lot of transfers. A lot of guys have transferred out of here. So that's taken a toll on the roster as well. Now, some of those probably aren't going to do much where they go. But you lost
I
some
think
guys.
the majority will not do
Yeah,
much.
but
with
you
it.
lost some talent there. There's no question, at least as recruiting stars. And later in the show, we're going to show you Tennessee's depth chart, and we'll look at what kind of star ratings these guys had coming out of high school. But next, I want to talk about a situation at Ole Miss, the Hugh Freeze situation. What a mess. We'll discuss that and then plenty more Vols and Vol roster discussion later in the show. Come on back on the Sports Source.